Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of our Dungeon Boss PvP series. Today we are taking a look at the second half of our Shade-Balog issues in terms of how can we beat the Shade-Balog team with the team provided, assuming that we don't have any festive runes. So this was a natural continuation of what was suggested the last time around. The festive runes, while they're a great addition to Emily's team, if you don't have festive runes for Emily, obviously we have to come up with some alternatives. So I figured we'd run through a couple of the quick scenarios that happen if you don't have those particular runes. We're going to go over two possible scenarios, and I'll talk about some pros and cons here. So we're going to start off with basically we're attacking the same team. We're going with the Shade-Balog teams, and this is what I'm going to be calling the traditional Shade-Balog team, in terms of Balog going first before Drac. If Drac goes first, that kind of shakes things up a little bit. I would tend to ignore that unless you have the festive runes, just to play it safe. But you can beat either of them regardless. Rune power on this one, if we look at it, it's a 55-28, sorry. So it's not a bunch of elite runes. There could be elite runes on there, but mostly superiors. And we're also dealing with a little bit of a level disparity on my part as well. They're 72, I'm 70, so this should be a very good challenge for us. I've taken the two festive runes off of my Emily, and I've just replaced with two of the best runes that I had laying around. Neither of them are spectacular by any means. The red one is actually an attack rune, so probably not the best for Emily. And then the green one, I think, is just a greater, or else it's a 4-star or 5-star or something like that. It's not the greatest rune. It's just a heavy Aegis rune with a bunch of damage reduction and damage reduction in PvP. The team we are using is still the same team. We're going to come back around to this Echo team afterwards, but that's not my preference right now. So I am going to talk about this Echo team as well, but we're going to use same basic principle, except we just don't have the cleanse option right away. So we are going to start out with Gortusk. Gortusk is there for your damage mitigation. And then now, because of where we're at in terms of not being able to cleanse right away, it doesn't really make sense for us to put Emily first, because we don't need to worry about de-silencing Furno. So in my opinion here, the best option is actually throw Furno first, just so you can get a free shot on Drac, provided that Furno survives, which he should, unless Shade goes after Furno and then Balog finishes him off. That's not going to be the end of the world, but that's what we're looking at. From here, we are going to go either Emily or Agnon. Doesn't really matter at this point. I'm just going to say Emily and then Agnon. The Agnon's always been batting cleanup, so that's just where I put him. The start to this fight is always going to be the same for the most part when we have this particular order. Abigail is going to attack Gortusk. It's going to do little to moderate amount of damage, and then Shade's going to go pretty much wherever. If Shade targets Furno after the Abigail buff, it could mean the end of Furno at that point. And then that's kind of just damage control at that point. You'll be able to revive him, but ideally you don't want to have to revive that soon. So there's that, and there's that. That's actually good for us. Now, there is some debate. I know Fantasy and I could talk about this all day, probably the merits or non-merits of trying to freeze on the first turn. The idea with freezing on the second turn is more so that you can use your freeze on Shade because the Shroud is gone. And so that's a benefit of going on turn 2. My preference, especially here, since I don't have my cleanse right away, I'm going to want to try and freeze Drac just for a little bit of an extra safety net. That's the goal, because then if I can get some wildfire on him and ultimately kill him, he's going to do some damage anyways. If we chose to not freeze, or the freeze doesn't take hold, ideally I think we have low enough stacks on Gortusk where we could probably survive. It's sort of dealer's choice in terms of where you want to try and do the freeze. Ultimately, all that really matters is that the freeze takes. If the freeze doesn't take, you're already at a disadvantage, and so there's nothing we can really do to help or hinder that. In fact, the fact that I'm 2 levels lower, it's suggesting that I might not even successfully freeze here, but we're going to try it anyways. So I know we'll talk about the freeze in the second turn when we get to the other team. In this case here, I'm going to stick with my first turn freezing because I know my Agnon is going to kill Shade. That's happening regardless, unless some really wonky things happen. So we'll try for the freeze. success. That's good. Balog does his thing. And we received only a moderate amount of damage. That's good for us. And so we don't need Furno to be able to do his wildfire on the first turn. My suggestion is Furno's usually a glass cannon, so the fact that he survives this is a good thing, but ultimately he's likely going to die on the second turn. That's almost certainly going to happen. So when we don't have the cleanse from Emily, basically what we're looking at now is how soon can we get wildfire out there. This entire fight is based on the premise that Furno is going to be doing this wildfire. If we don't get wildfire out there on at least one guy or a couple of guys, it's going to make for a very difficult fight to win, because once the second turn rolls around and those guys start using their second abilities, the gloves are off, because Gortus starts gaining stacks of momentum, losing his protection. Emily's no longer protected by her shield, and they're going to start putting pot shots on these guys. And Agnon's subject to be getting killed. Furno's going to die. Emily's going to die. Everybody's basically a ticking time bomb at this point. So do the basic attack, and it didn't take hold, which that happens all the time in my opinion. When you do basic attacks, that's part of the reason that I went with the festive runes, is because it seemed like wildfire breath was more likely to issue the wildfire. It's not the end of the world though. We're still going to try and get another attack or two with him on there. So with Emily up now, we can see that neither of my second abilities are available because the festive runes are gone, so it doesn't really matter where we put this attack. There's no wildfire to spread, so nobody to really attack. Just throw an attack on someone and call it a day. So, as mentioned, I'm not going to deviate from the norm here. I am going to kill Shade because I do not want that Spirit Link out there. That may or may not be a risk in some people's eyes, but Shade is going down. So, get rid of him. And then now we just got to deal with the fallout. So, at this point here, this is where we're basically live and die by wildfire. If Furno goes down and we can revive him, we're all set. If something else happens, then this is where it gets into a little bit of a crapshoot, and you may or may not win. This is part of the reason why I don't use this team at the end of the day. Ultimately, you want your heroes to be as strong as possible, and personally, I felt that having my 2 festive runes on Emily far outweighs them on anybody else, such as like Koros, for example. And so those runes are ultimately going to stay on her as a long-term home, which is going to make her stronger for me at the end of the day. That's what you want. The goal here should not be to have to always constantly swap around runes. So if you have the 2 festive runes, I think they're a good permanent home on Emily. If not, do your best to try and manage this. So it doesn't matter who we attack, it's just random junk at this time here. We actually have the provoke, so there's nothing we can do there. So, see if we can get some wildfire, which we still didn't get. Here comes the pain now. And still nothing. In terms of death, at least. And we can use our hardened assault if we want. That's going to help us, but ultimately, without wildfire, it's, not the greatest. Alrighty. So now we're getting into the big hits now. We start getting all these mega attacks because I started launching all my attacks on them. Once Emily dies, that's pretty much game over. So that's the risk you run when you don't have the ability to get Furno out early. Now, you could make the argument that Furno, if he would have died, we could have resurrected him. Thing is, he didn't die because they didn't target him. If they're not going to target him, he's not going to die regardless of what runes you have on him. I have him as all attack runes, so it's not like I'm buffing him up in heavy defense, so he's not sticking around as this pseudo tank of sorts. He's basically just hanging in there. So this is going to be the end of it here, because these 2 paired together with only Agnon left, it's a death sentence. So, and my Emily is runed out heavily for defense, so it's not like she was some slouch, but this is typical, in my opinion, how these matches go. So now you can critique all you want in terms of what was done right or what was done wrong, but if Furno doesn't die and you can't resurrect him, or you do 2 of his basic attacks and neither of them trigger wildfire, that's completely RNG. That's nothing on my tactics, and it's nothing based on level at all. If there's no wildfire, that team does not work. And so Like I said, you live and die by wildfire when you're attacking barb teams with a Inferno team. If it doesn't trigger, it doesn't trigger. Sometimes you just gotta swallow your pride and go with it. So we'll give it another go just to see if we can get some better RNG on this one. We just gotta find another one to attack. Baking soda, that sounds like a good one. Alright, same basic premise except for Shade and Abigail are reversed and Drac and Balog are reversed. I don't know if I want to do that one, but you know what? That's the team we got. So we're going to go with these guys just to shake things up a little bit. The premise should still be the same. With Drac going first and me not freezing him, it's possible maybe we could get Inferno to die and then, you know, perhaps things will work out that way. So I guess that's one argument we could make for the last one. If we wouldn't have frozen Drac, maybe his pillage attack would have gotten a couple of pot shots on Inferno, and Inferno would have went down. I guess that's a reasonable argument. I can't dispute that one. It's probably is equally likely or unlikely that it would have worked. It's not going to be a guarantee because Gortusk will do some damage reduction at that point. It's hard to guarantee that Inferno would have died there. On top of that, Inferno still had his debuff up to his anti-flying one. So we will, you know what, let's save our freeze on this time around just for the sake of saving the freeze and see where that takes us. Because the freeze literally can be done on either of the two turns. It doesn't matter as much for the second turn because Shade's going to be dead anyways and Shade goes first, but and alright, so the order that I had, because I had I had Inferno before Balog, that's actually a good thing for us. So we actually get our attack off. Now we got Wildfire out there. So that's what I was saying before. It's almost always likely that Wildfire triggers on Wildfire Breath. This is kind of bad news bears here. So we can either save our revive, use it on Inferno to try and get some extra attacks on there. If we use it on Inferno, we can at least kill Drac. That's probably going to happen. After that, we could, I mean, having Gortusk up there is going to be great for defense, but I don't really advocate for bringing him back unless you're using beast teams. Shade's still going to die, so we don't have to worry about possession. We may be able to hold out long enough, and I don't know if we can, to be honest. It's like we're almost kind of pigeonholed here with two guys dying because we bring back Gortusk for the defense and then we don't have any attack. We bring back Inferno for the attack and then we don't have any defense. It almost feels kind of like lose-lose here, but we're going to go ahead and try to kill off Drac with our double attack here. And then we'll kill Shade. It's going to be 3-on-1 for 4 turns until we can get some energy back and bring Gortusk. And then the Wildfire didn't trigger either. But Emily's revive does bring back energy, which is always a good thing. So we'll try and kill Balog. He is a tank. Caster versus tank should always be successful. There we go. So now it's over. With a small asterisk, we'll see here. Okay, there it goes. Now, is this how that would typically go? I don't usually see 2 people dying in that first turn. I don't. So that you could take that with a grain of salt. It could be a little bit of luck, could be a little bit of just being in the right place at the right time. But remember from the last video I did, when Drac is first, you always have the option to get your pot shot in first, because as long as they're not silenced, the order of Emily Inferno is important there. But let's try the last team here and see if we can get somebody out here. I'm going to have to do some refreshes here. And we'll talk about this Echo team. What's good about it, what's not good about it. This is your, again, actually I just attacked this guy, I think. Yeah, okay, so this is redemption time. Beast mode. So, the notion of using Echo. There's a couple things with Echo. Echo has always been a great support hero. He's even gotten a few boosts over the years, I guess. But basically, he's got a mechanic now that obviously his first ability gives energy. That's great and all. He also has a passive that gives a +1 energy. It's not enough to make Emily, be able to use her skill on the first turn. So it's kind of just there, in my opinion. But it does make it up for the second turn, which is usually good enough. So in terms of the order here, I don't know that the order necessarily matters, because Balog is going to silence. That's going to silence everybody but Emily. And so my guess is throw a little bit of basic attack out there, try to get the Ferno onto Drac, wildfire attack, and if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The rest of the order from Emily and Echo doesn't really matter too much in my opinion. So the fact that Echo doesn't give Emily 2 energy, and the fact that he's going to be silenced, and so I can't even just use Echo's first ability in order to preemptively set up Emily's first turn cleanse, he's not a very big... there's not really much of an upside to this fight here, in my opinion. We also have to contend with 2 other things. We lost a serious damage dealer by swapping Agnon out with Echo. Echo is not a damage dealer by any stretch. Yeah, he can survive the first turn because of his little, electro shield thing, but not having Agnon is a huge disadvantage, because now that brings Shade into play. We're not going to kill Shade in the first turn at all. It's just not happening. If you can kill Shade in the first turn with this team here, I would like to see video proof of that, because it's not happening. It just isn't. So that means that we need to, because Abigail went first in what we call this traditional team here, that's actually good for us. If Shade would have gone first instead of Abigail, that's bad news bears, because in the second turn we wouldn't even be able to throw our freeze on Shade. But because Abigail went first, Gortos is going around, I'm going to save my freeze for the second turn, hopefully prevent Shade from doing Spirit Link. So he's only going to be able to Spirit Link Ferno. Well, I guess he could Spirit Link Gortusk, but if he does that to Ferno and Ferno dies and then he possesses Ferno, that's over as well. So we'll just hit Abigail because she's Sparky right now. And then we got this. So, alright, so now Ferno is silenced as expected, and so we have one of 2 things that we can do. We can either throw a shot on Abigail and try to spread some of that shock damage in addition to the wildfire, or just do a direct attack on Drac with the wildfire. To be honest, I would normally go for Drac, but I am always a sucker for trying to spread on shock. I do love shock damage, so every time there's shock out there, I try to spread it. So that may not be the right idea here, but to be honest, it's not going to matter who. If wildfire doesn't trigger, wildfire doesn't trigger. There's no 2 ways around that. And since we don't have Ferno's first ability, we saw from previous fights that a basic attack from Ferno is only going to put a minor dent in Drac. So it's not going to matter either way. So try to spread some lightning, which it did reach Balog a little bit, and I think it just barely grazed him, but nothing special. We're just going to keep on that train right now. We don't have any cleanse yet at this time because it's still the first turn. Alright, so the shocking really didn't do much. Seems like something was out of order here. Yes, that was a hashtag my bad, or hashtag my bad. Somewhere here, I ended up throwing a slow on Abigail. That kind of throws a wrench in things, because then I couldn't do my freeze. Fortunately, he chose to target... Well, it didn't matter anyways. He's silenced, so I don't know what I'm talking about. So we got no damage dealers, and none of our abilities are up until the next turn. And our guys are not going to be dead, or not going to be alive at that point. So this is the linchpin right here. Either these guys are going to be alive, or they're not. And we got 1 stack of wildfire out there. So we want to... Shade already did Spirit Link, so he can't possess unless there's somebody to possess. Smart play here, in my opinion, is to freeze Drac. Drac is... he's just too hardcore. So now... another catch-22. I obviously want to kill Balog, but I also want to do Wildfire Breath. Don't have any other flyers. Let's kill Balog first. Let the chips fall as they may. Didn't even work. He's dead now, though. Alright. So, you can see already that this team requires a shitload more thought. Now, just the fact that I won, yeah, that's great and all, but I'm not wagering a streak of 20 on this. waiting for this random thing to happen here or waiting for this random thing to happen there. Again, same disclaimer. You can comment all you want in terms of not running this fight properly, but the fact that we're missing Agnon to start with and we don't have any real damage dealers, it all comes down to Wildfire. If you don't trigger Wildfire, the fight's over. You may as well just quit. So I think there's plenty of ways that you can play out that fight, but if the Wildfire doesn't trigger, you're not winning. That's just how it is. Now, I got sort of lucky that I got some basic Wildfire out there and I was able to kill off Balog when I did and freeze Drac when I did. But that little slip up with the slowing down on Abigail and not being able to freeze Shade, that could have been a bad situation. Now, Emily does do her little cleanse thing, so it may not have been as bad as I thought, but I don't like that Spirit Link lingering around, especially if somebody hits with a retaliation shot and then all of a sudden Shade does possession. It's not something that I want to contend with. So I always want Shade pacified as much as possible, which is why I like Agnon in there, because I know for a fact he's going to kill him first turn. I've yet to see a Shade that survives Agnon in turn 1. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight in terms of what can happen in terms of victories and what might not happen in terms of procs here and there if you don't have those festive runes. So by no means is it impossible to beat that team with a regular plain Jane Emily. But obviously, if you have better runes on Emily and you have those festive runes, you're certainly going to increase your odds quite a bit. And all things considered, having Emily with those 2 runes long term is going to be nothing but helpful, because any other team you might run into, let's just say hypothetically you run into I forgot his name already, Igorok team or a Selwyn team, and somebody freezes you on the first turn. Emily's going to be immune to that. She could just use her cleanse right on that first turn, and you could be right back in the game. So, that being said, I think that's going to wrap up this video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, we will see you again next time. Thanks. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you like this video, please show your continued support by hitting that like button, and be sure to check out both my YouTube channels for new content all the time. And always remember, peace is a lie, there's only passion. We'll see you next time.